A very good evening, aspirants. Welcome to Daily Newspaper Analysis of Shankar IAS Academy. Today's date is 15th of May 2024. Displayed here are the list of news articles that we are going to discuss today. Now, before getting into the discussion, I have an important announcement for you. The most awaited All India mock test registration has begun. The first mock test will be on 26th May 2024. The second test will be on June 2nd, 2024, and the third test will be on 9th June 2024. You can attend the test both online and offline, and you can know about the offline centers using the registration link given below. So what are you waiting for? Just register and check your preparedness for the UPSC Prelims 2024. With this announcement, let us move on to the newspaper analysis. Look at this previous question. This question asks you to find when the market demand for a good might increase. See, to answer this particular type of question, you have to understand the relationship between the factors listed and the demand curve. Now look at this first statement. Price of its substitute increases. See, if the price of a substitute good increases, consumer will likely shift their consumption towards the relatively cheaper good, that is the one we are considering. This will increase the demand for this good, hence shifting the demand curve to the right. Now the second statement says price of its complement increases. See, when price of a complementary good increases, it becomes more costly to use alongside the original good. This generally leads to a decrease in the demand for both the complementary good and the original good, because using them together becomes more expensive. Therefore, this does not increase market demand for the original good, but rather decreases it. Now the third statement says the good is an inferior good and income of the consumers increase. See, inferior goods have a negative income elasticity of demand, meaning that demand for them decreases as consumer income increases. So if the good in question is an inferior good and income rises, the demand for this good would actually decreases. Okay. Now the fourth statement says its price falls. See, according to the law of demand, if the price of a good decreases, the quality demand of that good increases. This results in a rightward shift in the demand curve, indicating an increase in market demand. So from this analysis, we can say that statement 1 and 4 currently identify scenarios where the market demand for a good would increase, whereas statement 2 and 3 describe situations where the demand for the good would decrease. Okay, so here the correct answer is option A, 1 and 4 only. Moving on to the second question. This question is about casual workers. Before that, who are casual workers? See, a casual worker means any person who is employed by the employer on an occasional, as needed, day-to-day basis, but not an ongoing regular basis. So here the first statement says all casual workers are entitled for employee provident fund coverage. See, as per Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, the definition of the employee is an inclusive definition that includes any person who is engaged either directly or indirectly in connection with the work of an establishment and is paid wages. But the issue is with the statement, it says all casual workers. This is a vague statement. We cannot say that all temporary employees are covered. So this statement is actually incorrect. If you could eliminate statement 1, you can directly arrive at the answer, that is option B, 2 and 3 only. Look at the second statement. It says all casual workers are entitled for regular working hours and overtime payment. See, according to Minimum Wages Act, employee in India are entitled for regular working hours and overtime payment. To be very specific, according to Minimum Wages Central Rules 1950, when a worker works in employment for more than 9 hours on any day or for more than 48 hours in any week, he shall, in respect of overtime work, is entitled to a wage. So this statement is actually correct. Now the third statement says the government can by a notification specify that an establishment or industry shall pay wages only through its bank account. See, this statement is actually correct. The central government has notified the amendment under section 6 of the Payment of Wages Act 2017 with the provision that the appropriate government may by notification in the official gazette specify the industrial or another establishment, the employer of which shall pay to every person employed in such industrial or another establishment the wage only by check or by crediting the wages in his bank account. So this statement is actually correct. The correct answer for this particular question is option B, 2 and 3 only. See, here you might get confusion whether the first statement is right or wrong. As per official key of UPSC, the first statement is wrong. Okay. So now let's move on to the news article discussion. Look at this applied ethics question which comes from the international ethics topic. See, this kind of question is very vague in ethics paper and have a high chance of reflection in examination. So let us try to answer this particular question. Let me read out the question for you. International aid is an accepted form of helping resource challenged nations. Comment on ethics in contemporary international aid. Support your answer with suitable examples. See, here in the intro part you can define what is international ethics. Then you can give its parameter and why it is important in the current geopolitical scenario. Then in the body of the answer you can write about the ethical dimension of international aid. And don't forget to give examples and case studies in this answer to substantiate your argument. So this is how we are going to address this particular question. So let's straight away move on to the introduction part. Here you can write that international aid refers to the assistance provided by one country or international organization to another country which is facing various natural or humanitarian challenges. Though it aims to achieve goals like elevating poverty, promoting sustainable development, addressing humanitarian crisis, ethical dilemmas often arise regarding the distribution of resources, power dynamics, and long-term impacts. Moreover, one pertinent ethical concern revolves around the paternalistic nature of aid, wherein the donors may impose their ideologies or agendas on recipient countries, particularly undermining their autonomy and perpetuating the dependence. So this can be a introduction. Now moving on to the main body of the answer. Here you have to give some of the ethical foundation of foreign aid and the concerns of it. Firstly, let us see the ethical foundation of ethical aid. First, you can write with respect to altruism and humanitarianism. Altruism is a fundamental ethical foundation of international aid, emphasizes selfless concern for the welfare of others. India is a front runner of this principle since its independence, advocating for decolonization, helping underdeveloped nations, and etc. Recently, during COVID-19 times, India adopted vaccine Maitri program to help the poor countries by giving them free vaccination. Secondly, global solidarity. The principle of global solidarity underscores the shared responsibility of the international community in assisting nations facing challenge. For example, countries are fighting shoulder to shoulder in fight against terrorism and human trafficking and etc. Third, with respect to capacity building, it emphasizes on empowering nations to bring self-sufficient and reliance. See, the Marshall Plan post World War II exemplifies this principle by focusing on long-term recovery of Europe. Fourthly, working on key areas like education and health. See, both of these areas no boundaries and important for humanity. On understanding this, the ethical imperative to enhance education and healthcare is paramount in international aid efforts. Various agencies like UNICEF, which actively promote education, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with significant contributions to improving healthcare around the world, are working on this front. Finally, with ecological sustainability, see, the climate change is creating neo-ethical issues around the world and we are fighting against it. On realizing this, global nations are creating funds like Adaptation Fund, Loss and Damage Fund, which support projects that mitigate the impact of climate change in vulnerable countries. So you can write these points with the examples in the first part of your body, and then you can move on to the second part. Here you have to write about the ethical issues in international aid. Firstly, with increased dependence. See, the current global system often causes weaker nations to become economically dependent on stronger nations. Many nations follow debt diplomacy policy, which is very unethical one. They give bailout for the countries which are in debt. On return, they will get a lease for the asset at a meager rate. For example, China follows debt diplomacy by investing in Sri Lanka and Pakistan in return of their assets like ports, airports, roads, and etc. Secondly, transparency and accountability in the distribution and utilization of the foreign aid. See, the lack of it results in corruption, wastage, and stifling of development processes. For example, WP report highlights resource misappropriation by African dictators, which is often called aid curse. Thirdly, with respect to non-state actor funding, see, the issue of funding local NGOs with the vested interest has been a global issue across the world. Note that by giving funds to the local NGOs, the donors seek to shift the target government's policies and serve their interest. Even though it was done for good sake, the idea behind it is to create social disturbances, slowing down development works and etc. Now fourthly, funding for clinical trials. See, many Western countries have been accused of funding voluntary clinical trials in poor countries of Africa and Asia. This is a clear violation of human rights and bodily autonomy. So you can write these points in the second part of your answer. Now moving on to the conclusion part, here you can write that the ethical dimensions of international aid are complex and multifaceted in nature. We ought to strive the balance between noble intentions and self-interest of the country. The principles like fairness, transparency, accountability, respect for sovereignty, and efficiency should be incorporated to provide international aid to make it a meaningful grant rather than a vicious one. So you can write these points in the conclusion of your answer. So this is how you have to give answers for an ethics question, especially with respect to international ethics topic. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Look at the science page article. Recently, there is a rise in solar activity, including more frequent and intense solar storms that are creating auroral lights visible in unusual locations around the world. These solar storms, caused by charged particles from the sun interacting with Earth's magnetic field, can disrupt power grids, satellites, and pose risks to astronauts. So the scientists, including those at the Indian Space Research Organization (ISRO), with their Aditya L1 spacecraft, are monitoring these solar events closely to improve forecasting and understand their impacts on space weather. These are the crux of the article given here. So in this news article discussion, we shall see few facts related to sun that is very relevant for our prelims examination. First, we shall see what is a solar cycle. See, the solar cycle is the approximately 11-year cycle during which the activity level of the sun, like solar flares and the appearance of sunspots, fluctuates between minimal and maximal. This cycle is driven by the magnetic field of the sun, which undergoes complex changes, including a reversal of the magnetic pole at the cycle's peak solar maximum. Okay, now let us see how this actually happens. See, during solar minimum, the sun exhibits fewer sunspots and lower overall activity. This period is characterized by a relative calm with few disturbances emanating from the sun's surface. As the cycle progresses, it enters the ascending phase, where there is a gradual increase in the number of sunspots and overall solar activity. This phase leads up to the solar maximum, which is the peak period of activity. During the solar maximum, the sun is dotted with many sunspots and experiences a significant uptick in the frequent and intensity of solar flares and coronal mass ejections. These phenomena can have profound effects on space weather, influencing satellite operation and communications on Earth. Following the peak, the cycle moves into the descending phase. In this phase, the activity level starts to wane with fewer sunspots and a decrease in solar activity, gradually returning to the quiet of the next solar minimum. This cyclical pattern of solar activity is crucial for understanding and predicting space weather events that can impact Earth's technology and environment. Okay, this is about the solar cycle. Now let us see what is a solar storm. See, solar storm generally refers to heightened solar activity, including solar flares and CMEs, which are most frequent around the solar maximum. CME is nothing but coronal mass ejections. Here, solar flares are intense bursts of radiation emanating from the release of magnetic energy associated with sunspots. Solar flares can affect radio communication, GPS, and power grids by disturbing the Earth's ionosphere. Similarly, CMEs are huge expulsion of plasma and magnetic fields from the sun's corona. These can take several days to reach Earth and have the potential to create geomagnetic storms upon interaction with the Earth's magnetosphere. Now let's quickly see how the auroral lights are formed. See, when CMEs or high-speed solar wind particles reach Earth, they can interact with the Earth's magnetic field, causing complex changes in the magnetosphere. These interactions conditions include the compression of Earth's magnetic field on the day side and an extension on the night side, along with reconnection of magnetic lines. So what is the meaning of this magnetic reconnection? See, as solar wind disturbs Earth's magnetic field, it causes a temporary reconfiguration and connection of magnetic field lines. When these lines snap back into place, they release energy. The energy released during magnetic reconnection accelerates charged particle trapped in the Earth's magnetosphere. These particles then travel along magnetic field lines towards the poles, where they collide with molecules of oxygen and nitrogen in the Earth's upper atmosphere. These collisions excite atmospheric molecules which emit light when returning to their ground state. So the color of the aurora depends on the type of gas being excited and the altitude of the collision. For example, oxygen emits green and red light, while nitrogen can emit blue and purple light. So this is how the auroras are formed. Okay, so in this news article discussion, we saw in detail about the solar cycle, then what is a solar storm, and then we saw how the auroral lights are formed. So these learned points. Now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Look at this picture from the Science Page article. The photo shows wildfire in Alberta, Canada. After experiencing its warmest winter and severe drought, Canada is facing high risk of more wildfires this summer. The lack of snow from the winter means the ground and forest are very dry, making it easier for fires to start and spread. This is the crux of the news article given here. So taking this as an opportunity, let's revise few basics of wildfire for the upcoming prelims examination. Firstly, know that forest fire, also known as wildfires, are categorized based on how they burn, their intensity, and the layers of the forest they affect. Understanding these types helps in planning their prevention, detection, and suppression effectively. Let's explore the types of forest fire, where they typically occur, and how their impacts can be mitigated. Firstly, let us see about the types of forest fire. See, first one is crown fire. These fires spread rapidly by wind and burn through the canopy above the ground. Crown fires are the most intense and dangerous, as they can jump across roads, rivers, and fire breaks due to flying embers. They are very common in coniferous forest, where trees have a lot of resin and their canopies are close together. Conditions that facilitate crown fire include dry weather, high wind, and abundant fuel in the upper forest layers. Secondly, surface fires. These fires burn dead materials lying on the forest floor, such as leaf litter, fallen branches, and grass. They tend to be less intense and are easier to control compared to crown fires. They are frequent in many forest types, but particularly in deciduous forest or mixed forest during dry season or in drought condition. Then the ground fires. They are also known as subsurface or underground fires. These burn on or below the forest floor's surface in the humus or peat layer. They smolder slowly and can burn for a long time unnoticed, making them difficult to extinguish. They are common in peat-rich areas or forest with a thick layer of organic matter, such as boreal forest or swampy areas. Now let us quickly go through the mitigation measures. See, to mitigate forest fire, several strategies can be implemented. Firstly, educating the public about forest fire risk and enforce regulations like burn bans. We can maintain clear zones and fire break around populated area to reduce fire spread. Secondly, we can utilize satellite and aerial technology to quickly detect fires. We can employ drones for real-time monitoring and organize rapid response teams equipped with aerial firefighting tools like helicopter for immediate action. Then we can reduce forest floor fuel through controlled burns and mechanical cleaning of brush and debris, especially in vulnerable areas. Fourthly, we can engage local communities in preventive efforts and enforce building codes that require the use of fire-resistant materials in construction. So we can do these things to mitigate the forest fire most effectively. So in this news article discussion, we saw the different types of forest fires, where do they occur, and how we can mitigate them at the earliest. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next part of the news article discussion, which is the preliminary practice question discussion. Look at this first question. This question asks you to find the Halley cycle is associated with which of the following phenomena. See, the correct answer here is option B, solar magnetic activity and sunspots. Now look at the second question. Here 4 statements are given and you have to find how many statements given here is or are correct. Here the first statement says, once the central government notifies an area as community reserve, the chief wildlife warden of the state becomes the governing authority of such forest. This statement is incorrect because as per 36D of the Wildlife Protection Act, the state government will constitute a community reserve management committee. This committee is only responsible for conservation, maintenance and management of the community reserve. For those who don't know, community reserve is nothing but a buffer zone, two or connectors and migration corridors between established national park, wildlife sanctuary and protected forest of India. Okay, look at the second statement. It says hunting is not allowed in such area. This statement is actually correct. After a forest has been made into community reserve, people are not allowed to hunt there. Now the third statement says people of such area are allowed to collect non-timber forest produce. This statement is also correct. They can collect non-timber forest produce. Now the fourth statement says people of such area are allowed traditional agricultural practices. This is wrong. After a forest has been made into community reserve, people are not allowed to hunt there or use it for agricultural practices like shifting or gem cultivation. Okay, so here the correct answer for the question is option B, only 2. So with this we came to the end of the news article discussion. If you like the video, hit like, do comment and don't forget to subscribe to Shankar IAS Academy YouTube channel. Now thank you so much for listening.